Why are you qualified to take on this role, and what would your highest priority be?
Gotcha. I think I'm the most qualified candidate to take on the seat that Russell Gilbert is vacating. You know, Russell has served that seat for the last 12 years and has been very active in the community. And I like to think that I also have been active in the community. I have relationships with elected officials, different community partners, including my neighborhood association president, Ezra Harris, who is endorsing me. uh, and so I think what makes me the most qualified candidate is that I have a history of leadership activity in my community. And I have the right type of relationships that I think will be vital in helping move the district forward.
Got it. And now we'll do questions about the budget.
Sure.
As we near a year since the virus hit Chattanooga, businesses and individuals within the city are struggling due to COVID-19 as well. How would you provide aid to those businesses and family hit hardest by the pandemic's economic impact? And are there any programs in place that you would keep, and what other programs would you add?
Correct. Well, right now, the city has a grant program that's helping small businesses get back on their feet after being impacted by COVID. I own a business. I'm the CEO of Tennessee Transportation Partners. We employ about 3 individuals, and we drive for UTC, Carter, and Chambliss Center, and we haven't driven since December. And so we're one of those small businesses that have been impacted by that. And luckily, we've been able to rely on aid from the federal government, and we're probably going to apply for some assistance from the city government. So I think it's just really important to make sure that small businesses, especially minority businesses, um, have access to information and have access to capital to help keep their businesses afloat. And so, as our next city councilman, I plan to support that, and making sure if there are city funded programs that's included in the budget, so that we can help small business, mid-sized business survive. The impact of COVID-19 will be impacting us for years to come, and so we've got to put some infrastructure support to do that. And I support that wholeheartedly, and will fight to make sure that those monies are in our city budget, and we're partnering with state and federal governments to make sure that money comes to Chattanooga small business owners like myself.
So, paving and transportation consistently rank at the top of citizens' concerns, according to annual studies by the city. What transportation or infrastructural goals would you have if elected?
So I think one of the things I support as far as improving our transportation infrastructure is one, maybe we could make public transportation free. I know that seems outside of the box, but I think that not only will, as an environmental justice advocate, I believe in lessening our carbon footprint. And so maybe if we can make public transportation free, more people will take the public transportation system. It'll improve our streets because less people are on the streets, and improve the environment. Chattanooga is behind in street paving. My street just got paved probably about a month ago. And I worked with, again, our neighborhood association president, and we were just strong advocates in making sure that neighborhoods who oftentimes get left behind, that we're at the forefront of funding decisions. So I will work, again, I know you have some mayoral candidates who have pledged millions of dollars into those paving projects. I support that. My main goal is to make sure those paving projects are reaching District 5. And so that's what I will be a strong advocate for. And I look forward to working with council members and whoever the future mayor is to make that a priority.
A recent poll shows that 31% of District 5 residents surveyed consider economic development and job growth to be the city's top priority. Do you agree, and how would you address these concerns?
So I do agree. I think I believe in economic justice, and that's making sure that District 5 residents are getting our fair share of the city budget, meaning that that money from the city budget is actually reaching the people as far as job growth. I support economic development. I want to recruit and retain small businesses on Highway 58 and in the Brainerd commercial corridor areas. We've seen a lot of businesses leave the Brainerd Road area. We've seen a lot of businesses leave the Highway 58 area. So I stand in solidarity with my neighbors who say that, listen, we are a uh, thriving community and we want to see thriving businesses in our communities. And I think we need to work with the state, um, just not the city mayor, but the state in recruiting those businesses to our district. We have the infrastructure for it. And I think once you improve the economic landscape um, in those areas, Highway 58 and Brainerd, then that creates job growth. And when you have businesses moving in, people getting hired from the community, that also increases home ownership. So that's at the forefront of my priorities, is to grow small business and to grow the economy, specifically in those two communities.
We'll do some business and economy questions now. The first is, city labor unions and many activists support a $15 minimum wage for city employees, which Mayor Burke had intended to implement before the COVID pandemic. Do you support this or any other specific pay increase plans for city employees? Why or why not?
Absolutely. So I'm first of all, I want to say I'm proud to have the endorsements of several working class labor unions, such as SEIU, who have endorsed me, Change Tennessee, the Chattanooga Area Labor Council, are all groups who have said Dennis Clark believes in working families. I employ working families. I come from a working family. Um, and I really believe that we have to do what we can to make sure that the working families who work for the city, that they can afford to live in the city. Uh, and these are essential workers. Um, these are our first responders, like our firefighters, who are only making 1071 an hour. So I do support the increase, but I don't think we should just stop there. You know, we should have had $15 per hour in 2005. It's 2021. We need to increase those salaries to be more competitive. And I think when you pay people what they're worth, you also get good work out of them. And so we're behind on that. I will not support a budget or vote for a budget that doesn't include that increase for those workers. And that's my pledge to those labor unions who have endorsed me, and we call them essential workers. But if we want them to stay in our city, be able to afford to live in our city, we have to treat them essential. And right now we're not. So I support that wholeheartedly, and higher. I don't think it should just be 15. I think it should be 18 or $20 for what they contribute to our community.
In 2019, 40% of Chattanooga's households were housing cost burdened, meaning that they paid more than 30% of their income for housing and may struggle to afford other necessities. How would you address affordable housing in your district?
Yeah, that's a big deal. And affordable housing goes, it's convoluted in the fact that you're dealing with a lot of systemic issues, right? Systemic racism, systemic uh, gentrification, where there's racial inequalities in gentrification. There's economic justice issues, meaning that when employers come into our city, are people in my neighborhood qualified, and having the opportunity to have access to those jobs? And so when you look at affordable housing, you've got to look at, do people have access to opportunity? And I have a campaign that specifically talks about opportunity for all. And I think once we raise the playing field for all people to have access to that, I think that will fix our affordable housing issue. In the meantime, we need to look to other cities that have done how they maintain affordable rent prices, how they create land trusts, how they create zones with rent caps according to the per capita income of that area. We need to be a little bit more outside of the box and innovative in saying, hey, we don't want you to raise rent in this area and displace people, because that's what's happening in affordable housing. We need to create more affordable housing opportunities. Um, with mixed usage, and where there's development, we need to hold developers accountable and saying, did you create affordable housing units in my neighborhood that's affordable? They do that, and affordability is like $1,500 for a 1 bedroom, not according to what the average income is in my district. So you just got to hold people accountable. You got to hold developers accountable and making sure they're being inclusive to people who are low to moderate income. And then you got to fix the overall systemic issues, right? Of access to opportunity, access to the economy, to make a higher living wage, like our firefighters. I tell people our firefighters don't have access to capital to be able to live in affordable housing. That's a problem. And as our next city council person, I'll address those head on in how we allocate those funds and prioritize that in our city budget.
Next, we'll have some questions on public safety.
Sure.
Last fall in Chattanooga, shootings were up 20% from the same time in 2019 and higher than any time in the last 5 years. How would you work as a council member to lower crime in your district?
Gotcha. So about a year ago, I started an organization called the Chattanooga Urban Policy Institute to specifically address crime, not just in my district, but throughout the other neighboring districts that have seen an influx in violent crimes, particularly amongst African American males that could be gang related. And we teamed up with UTC, and we were like, okay, why are people committing crimes, right? What is the problem? And again, it boils down to this poverty issues, this access to opportunities. Then we also discovered that it also had to do with trauma informed care. Some people make poor decisions because of the trauma they lived either as a minority or just because of poverty issues. And so we teamed up with my organization, the Chattanooga Urban Policy Institute, teamed up with UTC and some other providers, and we're like, let's get some of the most violent criminals in our community, and let's just not label them, but let's help them, right? And so I think one way of reducing crime is to address that issue, correct? I also believe that if we create more job opportunities for people who don't have it, you don't have time to do crime because you're at work. You know what I mean? So there's again, it's a big piece to bite off and to try to solve in one fell swoop. I think we need to revitalize the violence reduction initiative that's more comprehensive and not just with $300,000 in the budget. I think we need to put our money where our mouth is. If we want to reduce violence, we've got to put the funding in the appropriate places. Hint, the appropriate places that deal with the systemic issues on why violence is up in the first place. And so I hope as a council person to bring my experience in the Policy Institute and how we address reducing crime into some legislation from city council that we can use throughout the city.
Activists spent this summer protesting police brutality across the country and in Chattanooga, demanding defunding or divesting from police. Would you consider defunding or divesting from CPD for reform? In what other ways, if any, would you consider law enforcement reform?
Absolutely. I believe I definitely so. So let me just be upfront. I believe in diverting funds from the police department, and not because they're not doing a good job, but it's just because I think there are other ways to address crime. I think we can divest that money and reinvest it into some social programs that I just mentioned in helping people get back on their feet, job opportunities, economic opportunities, mental health opportunities, right? So I do believe in that. I will support a decrease in that budget. I'm not sure by what percentage, but I think, it says a lot because, budgets are moral documents, right? You see where people spend money, like, okay, that must be where your priority is. And the budget is large. and I'm thinking to myself, like, if our police budget is that large, that means we have a big problem. And with crime or just maybe some issues with prioritizing budget stuff. It says a lot when it's just that disproportional to the other city services. And so that needs to be evaluated, and we need to divest in that. I support policing reform. We've gone. The country has a police violence issue. My family um, successfully sued the Chattanooga Police Department for a police violence issue against my smaller brother. I work with the Equity Alliance out of Nashville, and we specifically talk about police reform. And so this is something near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of respect for the police department. I think we need policing, but I think we need it. We need to make sure that they're not disproportionately policing the African American community. They need to understand the racial disparities in police and community policing, and they really need to weed out um, people who are insensitive to the African American community or who may have racial biases towards Black people. There are, as we know, there are police officers who are white supremacists. There are police officers who do not understand the Black culture and their bias. And when you're biased, you might, you may cause problems for people you don't like, pretty much. And so I'm for evaluating, researching, and getting to the bottom of that. And I think one of the first places to start is analyzing that budget and decreasing it and divest and reinvesting those funds back into the community.
Part of the unrest this summer was input during city council. Do you support current city council restrictions on public input during meetings? Would you change these policies or make any other efforts to encourage public input?
Yeah, I think public input actually doesn't start at city council. That's a 1 day a week, but an hour, and people want to cram conversations with their city council people in that 1 hour. I don't think that's effective democracy. I would encourage city council people get paid, and they don't get paid just to show up on Tuesday to vote, meaning that you can engage your city council outside of city council meeting. And I think prior to coming to the podium to bring forth your grievances or what have you, I'm going to ask questions. Did you email your council person? Have you met with your council person? Are they willing to meet with you? And if not, then we should chastise council people and say you're not doing your fiduciary duty and meeting with your constituents. I don't believe in restricting public speech, so I won't support any measures that restrict people from speaking at city council meetings. I mean, that goes against democracy and free speech, especially with your public officials. So I won't support that. I think you should be able to come and speak as long as you want, as many times as you like. But we also need to hold. I will be holding people accountable. If you come to the mic, I'm going to ask you. You got questions for me. I'm going to ask you questions that, as a citizen, are you doing your part? You're holding me accountable to do my part as the elected official. I'm going to ask you, are you using this opportunity for the right purposes? And can we meet to talk about this in more detail? So it's a two-way accountability street. And that's what I plan. That's how I plan to address that once I'm elected.
So this is some more miscellaneous questions. The first is, have you received a COVID-19 vaccine? And if not, will you when it becomes available?
I have not received a COVID-19 vaccination. As a matter of fact, my mom was just diagnosed with COVID yesterday, and she has not received the vaccine. And she is a little older than me, as you can imagine. I will, when it becomes available to me, I will take it. But I think we need to prioritize making sure that our most vulnerable population receive the vaccination first. And that includes people like my mom, who's over the age of 60. And once that happens, in the meantime, I'll just continue doing what we're doing, no in-person gatherings, no in-person interactions. For the most part, I stay at home and practice social distancing, and I wear my mask and would encourage other people to do that until we are eligible, healthy people like myself who are eligible to get the vaccine, but to yield to our more vulnerable senior population first.
I'm sorry to hear about your mom. I hope she's doing okay. What should the relationship between the mayor and city council look like? How will you cultivate relationships with the new administration?
Absolutely. There's this notion that there's supposed to be a strong mayor, weak council. I don't know where that comes from. I think people have made the notion that it's somewhere in our city charter. I have not read it. If you know anything about it, Sarah, let me know. But I don't believe in weak anything. I think both bodies should be more collaborative, and I don't think one should be weaker or stronger than the other. As a matter of fact, if any body should be stronger, it should be the council, because we are directly responsible for implementing the policies and ideas from the people who live in our district. The mayor is an administrator. His job is kind of that of a CEO. He manages the departments and auxiliaries of the government to make sure they're running smooth. Your sewer, public works, the fire department, the police department. That's an operational function. When it comes to policies and procedures, and just having a checks and balance on how the government is being ran, I think that responsibility resides with the city council. And so we need to be more collaborative, especially in the budgetary process. I don't support the budgeting for outcome process. I think it restricts public input from council and from the people. I think we need to be collaborative before a budget is presented, and people need to be at the table during that process, not after they put numbers together and they're making a presentation, but after we've had unions involved, city workers involved, more city council people involved, neighborhood association presidents involved. That's the type of relationship as a city councilman I hope to garner with the mayor's office or the executive branch, to be collaborative and to serve as a checks and balance on each other.
And finally, would you support using public money for a new Chattanooga Lookout Stadium?
I didn't mean to cough. Chattanooga Lookout Stadium didn't. The AT&T field, or
Yeah, I think that's.
I thought we already had one. But listen, I believe in public-private partnerships. I think we have a lot of successful examples of public and private partnerships. If there's something that we can do to help them add to the fabric of our communities, and for me, I'm specifically interested in how that helps low to moderate income people in my community, then I'm for it. If it's a priority and we have some funding available and we've done the right things in other communities first, like let's address affordable housing, let's address racial injustices first, let's address policing first. It'll be on the bottom of my totem pole as far as priorities. I'll have to do more research because I know that AT&T Stadium is not too long built. There's some rec centers in my district I would like to see built first. I don't know. I do support public and private partnerships. I'll have to evaluate that a little bit more. But right now, it will not be a budgetary priority of mine to support building or rebuilding an additional Lookout Stadium.
Thanks, Dennis.
Mm-hmm.